itself, the chest compression itself. And in Ireland, we love mechanical CPR. Oh, we love it. And we put on every single ambulance, every single response car. The logic is obviously you free up the human hand, you improve guideline consistency, you deliver more favorable outcomes, yeah? And you all know how that went. So the expense is obviously rightly being questioned. And then more importantly, we have to ask ourselves the question, do we actually have a latent safety issue if human and machine are equivocal? So, so I'll stop working that. So as with my earlier session, I have an important conflict of interest to declare. I consult for Viman, and I'm paid to teach services how to operationalize their technology. However, this isn't one of those lectures. This is, my goal here is physiology, not product. I'm actually going to just speak about the collision of forces, what happens when external chest compressions fight against inspiratory ventilation pressures. So that's the topic of this discussion. And the data is clear. I mean, mechanical CPR devices do not offer survival advantage over high quality human. But human bias is really kind of quick to jump on this, and we struggle for evidence. And what we say CRM, it's easier to get downstairs, crew safety, transport wins, etc., etc., etc. But why does the machine fail to demonstrate a survival advantage? You cannot ignore fatigue. I mean, human compression quality degrades. So what is it? Surely fatigue compromises Seamus's chance of further life. And let's be brutally honest though, CPR is trauma. To generate forward flow, we are applying forces that the human thorax was never designed ever to tolerate. And whether by hand or machine, all of this is borne out in CT studies. And the injury burden is not theoretical, it's there. Tissue deforms, structural integrity lost, compliance changes. And when we look at the pooled trial data and imaging data, mechanical CPR carries a higher injury burden than manual CPR. The harm signal was actually strong enough to stop a mechanical CPR trial early in years gone by. So look, you've all felt that moment with a sudden change in resistance. The chest is becoming soft and unstable. And when that happens, do we really believe that that fixed dose, 5 to 6 centimeters, still serves the patient's benefit? So with your hands, what do? You actually subconsciously, instinctively adapt to the changing dynamics. We know you do, okay? But the machine, what does it do? It continues to go whatever you set the machine to do, all right? And that's harm. So let's look into it in a bit more detail. If I just make one really obvious basic anatomy kind of observation, look at Sinead. Sinead is built very differently to Seamus. Different chest depth, different compliance, different organ geometry. If I blindly adopt Seamus average to Sinead, I will be harming Sinead, full stop. Our fundamental mental model of how blood moves, the physiology of the low flow state, is biased by doctrine. Whilst we debate these injury rates, we're actually missing the point. The failure of mechanical CPR isn't the machine's fault, it's our fault for treating the physiology of the low flow state far too simply. The safety challenge, this hands versus machine debate, actually needs reframing. Are we safely achieving a target? I still believe that's a valid question. But that target isn't 5 to 6 centimeters. That target is adequate oxygenation and perfusion in the brain or at that fingertip. We need chest compressions to deliver oxygen to the brain of the patient in front of us. Guideline metrics are population averages. Physiology is individual. The goal is oxygenation and perfusion, not symmetry with a guideline. So, that said, from a workflow perspective, arriving as a solo responder, I would immediately deploy a mechanical CPR device. Drop an iGel, attach a Mapleson C circuit. Machine buys the brain, buys a pair of hands. Grand. Then what matters? Pulmonary blood flow. So how do I know that I've hit the target? That humble oxygen saturation trace? At the fingertips. That's passive ventilation, it's not active ventilation. Meanwhile, across town, the firefighters are diligently doing their thing. They're pushing hard and fast in Sinead's chest. The firefighters are effectively a well-oiled human machine, high performance. Following FRC restoration, she too is that well oxygenated that she starts to ventilate. The midbrain is awakening, we've hit a correct target. But what actually determines intrathoracic pressure? That old cardiac pump versus thoracic pump explanation is far too simple. Sinead's heart is not just being squeezed between two bones. Seamus's heart is not just a vessel in a great big chamber that's oscillating. It's somewhere in between, and real-time echo and impedance data describes this mixed mode behavior. Real flow, in other words, perfusion, comes from a complex interaction of both of those forces. So I'm going to shout out to you now. It needs to be a bit more interactive. The question is, what determines intrathoracic pressure? So just shout it out. Compression only CPR. What determines intrathoracic pressure? This is easy. The compression itself. Thanks, Ema. All right. Breaths only. In other words, a ventilation during the pause and compression. What determines intrathoracic pressure? The breath. Guys, it's easy. You can do this, right? Help me here. Don't leave me hanging, right? Compressions and holding open the airway. Mapleson C circuit with a touch of PEEP. Say PEEP 5. What determines intrathoracic pressure? The sum of the compression and a 5 of PEEP. Summative effect. You're all with me now? Still? Yeah, okay, no blanks. All right, because this now gets difficult. Asynchronous breaths with a BVM during compressions. Oops. Okay. It's difficult to define, isn't it? Really difficult to be decisive about this because it results in an inconsistent, messy combination of forces. You simply have no idea where during the downstroke of chest compressions you are delivering your breath, do you? Okay? The most critical issue here of the BVM is safety. With a BVM, you have absolutely no idea of the spike in intrathoracic pressure that you're delivering. You are generating whatever. You have no idea. And I'll show you some really horrifying things now. With IPPV, flow curves change depending on, same as the BVM, exactly where during the compression downstroke you deliver your IPP breath. The main difference between using any ventilator and a hand is the ventilator has what? Safety valve. Okay, so it pops off of what you said it, does it? Largely, all right, but it depends on the software in the ventilator whether it actually keeps up. Okay, this is the scary thing. So this ventilator is set at 30, and you can see the IPPV breaths coming through. But actually look at the spikes. Some of those spikes are over 80. Oh dear. All right. Look closely at those 4 IPPV breaths and look at the flow. Can you see that you actually, more flow is coming out than going in? All right, it's really struggling. Okay? 4 IPPV breaths being delivered during chest compressions. Look at that flow curve. You can visualize the breath actually fighting against the compression. More air coming out than in. So for years we treated compressions and ventilations as 2 separate tasks. And by delivering them in isolation, we've not only inflicted harm, but we've missed the biggest single opportunity that we've had in resuscitation. So what if we could compress and blow at the same time? Imagine harnessing that summative effect of external compressions and internal breaths. Turn the chest basically into a unified, predictable pump, delivering massive flow without the need to effectively press as violently. With chest compression synchronized ventilation, your intrathoracic forces, your pressure changes are neatly the summative effect of the compression stroke and the ventilation breath, and because that intrathoracic pressure change is the greatest at the end of the downstroke, you exhale during recoil, which is the complete opposite of conventional CPR. Gas escapes during recoil. And it's in with this context, with these predictable, highly regulated pressure and flow curves in the thorax that we've been able to create a safety step with the use of mechanical chest compression devices. This is the interesting stuff now. And I'll be under no disillusion. It took us 6 years of going over and obsessing over performance data, obsessing over videos. We drilled into every single arrest. We looked at flow, live curves from the ventilator. We looked at post-op. It took years, all right? But what we developed was very unique. So, when we first started using CCSV, we were wondering why we were getting these horribly flattened flow curves when we were starting CCSV on Sinead. In other words, someone really small. So what do you think is happening? So that's tidal volumes. The inspiratory component of our flow curves is bumpy and lumpy. It's irregular. It's especially bad for mechanical CPR. But when our human compressors, our firefighters were pressing on the chest, they were going, hang on, it's getting stiffer. So they started to compress less deep when they were compressing in tandem with the ventilator. Okay, and it's adjusting that compression depth that we found the difference. And we realized we need to balance our depth of our work in harmony with the ventilator. We also learned that sometimes, and sometimes really hard way, not to fight the ventilator. It's designed to protect the patient, not flatter our own ego. And if the flows looked erratic or the ventilator was dumping, we always had to look back at our chest compression, because in CCSV, it's the chest compressions themselves that act as the inspiratory trigger. And so, if you're not fully recoiling, it's not going to work properly. If your rhythm is inconsistent, or if your depth is wandering, the ventilator will just wander with you. And this is where we really learn to slow do it. So, it basically, guys, my summary, it's time to stop simply automating the violence. When the chest softens, the chest thorax destabilizes, unchanged forces become harm. We really need to adapt to each individual patient. Look at that CPR feedback bar. That little guy is saying, hey, these guys are doing a bad job. Look at his job. Physiology is saying life. Another example. Machine saying press harder. Physiology is saying we're grand. Optimize flows, volumes, end-tidal CO2s and vitals. Now look at the compression depth. It's dramatically reduced. This patient has an obvious fractured sternum. Physiology was optimized at a compression depth of 2.1 centimeters. Things change. And with live monitoring, we change. And what we realize is during the evolution of resuscitation, that chest expands as you're filling it up properly. And so you actually have to change your compression depth. So it's not just, all right, let's optimize it, find where it is on ultrasound. No, we're actually actively up and down our compression depth. We're also going up and down our rate. And I love the, I don't know, proverbs around, talking the Windcastle effect. If you repeatedly obstruct the outflow tract, you actually undermine the very mechanism that smooths that sort of systemic perfusion. And I'm just wondering whether this addresses this. Being able to use breath in, chest compression depth in synchrony, to be able to actually reduce our chest compression depth, that we then allow natural, normal aortic recoil to happen and actually restore that physiology. Lots and lots and lots of work to do. I'll leave you with that arterial blood gas. It's taken 1 hour, 40 minutes into Seamus's resuscitation. He's still in arrest there, by the way. He needed actually double sequential defibrillation to get that back. And on his way to making a complete recovery following a bridge to ECMO in hospital. So much work to do. But guys, I have a little kind of, if you want to dive into my mind, that's my little place where I just kind of throw data, research, lectures, and I'll put those 2 lectures up on that site as well. And you're more than welcome. Thank you.